Welcome to a new episode of the Creative Industry Insight podcast. I'm your host, Bobby. Today, we welcome cinematographer Sophia Olson, who joins us to talk about her work on Season 6, Episode 1 of The Crown. Sophia will talk us through her experiences of working on the show and the creative decisions that she made. Please be warned there are heavy spoilers in this episode. Now let's jump into the conversation with Sophia. Hi, Sophia. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you.
We're excited to sit down and talk about the first part of the last series of The Crown, specifically talking about episode 1, which had its release a week today. Yes, the 15th was last week. 17th was last week, so it was a week today. I feel like this block of episodes feels like it's like kind of more of a movie than anything, because even though it's all sort of building up to this one conclusion of the story. Before we sort of jump into how you got onto the project, how you found the reaction to the episode, or to the first sort of 4 episodes, should I say? Sorry.
I mean, I've mostly actually heard about the first episode because I've heard people that have commented or called me or written to me, and it can be friends or colleagues, and they've been very positive. I guess the ones that are not positive, they're not contacting me, so they don't have to either. If they don't like it, that's fine. No, it's been positive, but again, I mean, I've also read the reviews, and they've been very mixed. And I know that that's something else. Is of course the whole first part, but no, it's been good for me. Yeah,
It's because The Crown, it feels like it's been building up to this sort of event of what happens in, especially like when I look at it as well, it's like it was quite a defining moment in history and when I was growing up. So I guess it's people are always going to be curious about how it's going to be handled and dealt with. And I think as well, like especially with how they don't show the accident itself, in terms of like you're just a sort of audience member outside, like we're following a guy walking his dog and he hears it, and you just see all these mopeds and scooters fly past, and even though we know what's going on, at the same time you have that moment of like, what on earth, because you don't know who's in the car. Audience members do, but somebody like him, he doesn't know, and he doesn't know what's going on. It just feels like the silence of Paris has been disrupted.
I'm happy to hear that, what you said there, the silence of Paris being disrupted. Yeah, because that's also what we were aiming for when we were planning on how to shoot it, to shoot the opening, that it's to keep it quite dry and calm, and seeing this man walking with his dog and not tracking with and doing these things, but just staying very still and observe him, mostly from the distance. I mean, like at the beginning, we just see his feet inside, stepping out with the dog, and and we also many times on level with the dog as well. We didn't really want to see the face of the man, of the French man. I mean, we do see his face later on, but not to emphasize on that, like being wider and then maybe going in closer, then we're mostly on the dog. And through that, hoping to, just like you said, this everyday thing, a man walking with his dog, and then this, of course, horrible accident happens. But it's also having many of the shots, many people, I guess, are thinking about the accident. The people that have followed The Crown and of course know what happened in real life. But it is then also like finding the locations for where he's walking, and what to emphasize on. And also, I remember when we found the location under a bridge, for example, where he's standing and trying to have the dog to pee, but the dog doesn't want to. And then just having the dramatic environment that is there, and it's also under something in the darkness. And that's of course what's going to happen later on as well with the tunnel. Not that it's that specific, but still that there's something coming. And also we're having, like, in that particular shot, there's a boat passing by, which there is in Paris, where they have these headlights showing for tourists at night, tourist boats. But this is our own boat with our own lights, so it's passing by, and then the lights coming, and later on that will be also the cars passing by and everything. So trying to point that out discreetly without writing anybody on their noses. And
this is like a everyday occurrence. Like what's being shown is like an everyday occurrence for this guy, that at a certain time he needs to walk his dog. There's probably the same spots where the dog is like, oh, you know, go do your business, like, so we can go back home. And there's also pointing, even though you're having those specific landmarks like the boat. I actually been on that boat before, so it's funny how you mentioned that, because it takes me back to like when I was 11 at school, and we did the tour going across Paris. I have no recollection of it because it was raining that day, so it probably wasn't that great to be on a boat, but neither here or there. And I think it's really smart to sort of go with and like give the audience to know that this is like a extraordinary situation happening to ordinary people, in terms of like all of this sort of commotion and this crash. And it's like, as you said, as we mentioned as well, it's like disturbing the peace of what's happening in Paris at the time. Before we dive more into the episode, I just want to know, like, how did the project come about and what made you want to take it on?
I was contacted by the director, Alex Gabassi, who had done 2 episodes in season 5 as well. And he was searching for a cinematographer to work with him on season 6. And he had found out about me, and he had liked what he had seen. So we had a talk just on Zoom. And after that, he got links to most of my work, and then he wanted to work with me. And then I had to talk to 2 producers at the production company, Left Bank, and then they had to check out if I was okay. So they had to contact producers I had worked with before, and after that it was a green light. And why I wanted to do it, I mean, it is especially after talking to Alex, and also talking about the characters, and talking about how I mean, I didn't have a script at that point. You're not giving a script at that point, and it wasn't ready either. I don't think it was, but it's more as well just us talking about the story and the crowd itself, and again about the characters and everything, and how he felt. And I think that was a really good conversation about those things, and also just loosely how we could portray it. I mean, we definitely didn't go into details, and of course not at that point, but still having a discussion about what we liked, what we preferred, and films and so on. Yeah, and that made me want to do it, definitely. Yeah. And it's also, I mean, the thing is, I've done mostly features. This is my first TV series. It was, of course, a fantastic TV series to start with, I must say. Yeah.
I guess sometimes it's like you get those calls and it's a bit like, of course, yeah, you know, I get, you know, especially with something like The Crown that has been very popular on Netflix, and even if it has a lot of chatter, if it's positive or negative about it, a lot of people do watch it. So I guess it's like another way of like, well, people see my work. But then also,
yeah.
So, go on. Sorry, go on.
No, because I was just thinking also the way it's been told, the way it's been shot. It's of course different directors, different DOPs and everything. But what I've liked, because I hadn't seen everything from The Crown when I was contacted, but what I have liked when it comes to the cinematography is that it gives space to, I mean, it works a lot with framings. Of course, everybody works with framing, so maybe that's a really stupid comment to say, but it has this mixture of very specific framings and storytelling and dramatic lighting, but at the same time, realistic feeling over it. Of course, it's nothing close to realism, but still it doesn't romanticize too much, I think. It's many times beautiful and so on, but it's still not going into these too heightened or enlightened things when it's like this big beam coming through a window with a lot of smoke and so on. Not that there's anything wrong with it, but that's what I like that they have chosen not to do in The Crown, to keep the dryness and part of realism still in it. And I think that's, for me, a big strength of the cinematography or the visual storytelling of The Crown in general.
I think as well, like when you're mentioning sort of framing and the visual nature of it, and also in like the sort of production design and set decorating, because I think
Definitely.
in your episode, this is, I think what sort of sticks out most is that there's like a really big contrast between sort of like old money and then slightly new money. So we have Charles and Camilla with their party, where they have like a big marquee, and the way that it's been lit with all these so I don't know the technical term, so excuse me about this, so if I'm butchering it, sorry, but they use the certain light bulbs at the top of the marquee to light them, and they have a certain different sort of warm lighting to it, whilst then when you go to sort of the yachts and in Saint-Tropez in France, it's very bright, everything's very decadent, everything's sort of more, we're showing off our wealth in a different sort of manner. And on top of that, like there's certain ways that scenes have been framed that the characters are in the middle of the frame rather than on the sides in the rule of thirds. So you're sometimes watching what's happening in front of you, but then something's just happening to the right or the left of the picture. So near the end of the episode where Dodie's come back onto the yachts and he's having a drink, and then we don't realize that Diana's just a little bit to the right of the frame on the piano. And it's like those sort of moments where you kind of see the massive difference in worlds of what's happening as well.
Yes, and I mean it is as well this obvious thing with the climate, of course, with Diana going to south of France and to the luxury there, but also the sun and the heat and the happiness and everything. And then on the other hand is Camilla and Charles, who are in the countryside in gloomy Britain somewhere, and finding out their relationship. And so that's also something that we were very aware of, just how we wanted to tell the story. And we also, and I mean, that's of course me and Alex, and it's also this feeling of that there isn't that much sun, at least not as much as in the southern France, and it's colder and grayer and everything, but they're still finding, Camilla and Charles are finding their love and safety and everything there, and Diana is in a way searching for hers, and I guess as well just wanting to get out of all the craziness in the UK. So that is also different then again with the type of lighting, and maybe some softer lighting as well with Camilla and Charles, and these huge windows, and the colors are more damp and it's much brighter in many ways. Both, being when Diana is Mohammed's villa in the south of France with its bright yellow color of the whole building, and then all the pink, red flowers and everything that is very strong and intense, compared then to Charles and Camilla's place, where it's much more damp colors. That is a huge difference that is going back and forth, which we of course then enhanced as well, lighting wise and well, now I'll just jump into the villa, because I also remember this when Diana, for example, is out on the backside, and then her son is on the inside gaming, because he doesn't want to come out because of all the paparazzi that are everywhere. So that's also like, it's always this, I think, when you're trying to find where to shoot and how to shoot it together with the director, is what you want to show and what does it tell, and in the framings, and which is of course happening there as well when she's on this beautiful spot in front of a swimming pool, and but her son is inside in the dark, which I guess would be quite common for a teenager in general. But he is actually hiding because he doesn't want to be out because of all the paparazzis, and he's in the dark, and you can also see it on how he seems to be doing throughout these episodes. William is that he's not dealing very well with this whole situations, which is of course easy to understand when your mom is meeting someone new that you don't really like either. And then we're also, like you were mentioning, by the frames there, we're showing also the extravaganza, or how you say it in English, of Mohammed's house, and the pool and the flowers and everything is very thought of to be special and big and dramatic, with a lovely production design, and then to be able to find the angles to enhance that.
Yes, and I think you can see the difference as well. And there's the scene that always kind of sticks out to me a little bit as well in terms of lighting and how things look is when Charles receives the call from the Queen asking about the party, and you can just tell by the colours and the way that they're sitting by a fire, and how lights that they have whilst sitting by the fire going off. There's like a beautiful hue around it as well. I don't know if that's added in with when they do the colouring in edits, but it's also then, whilst you're sort of watching that, you could kind of see the richness of the scene as well, even though it is a little bit, it's low lit.
I think, that scene is definitely, the way we've lit it, it's just to keep the coziness, just of really feeling the two of them finally having each other, even though the Queen hasn't accepted their relationship, which she's then going to call and more or less say that she's in favor of the relationship, or how you say it in English. But it's supposed to have this cozy feeling of the two of them being with the right partner, the one that's right for you. You just is sitting by the fire and reading and feeling that you're on the right place. So that's the feeling of that scene with that warm light. And I think in general throughout this episode, maybe even more in episode 8 that's coming later, not to be afraid of going dark and staying low lit. I know The Crown has done that a lot, so it's not that there's anything new, but that was one of the things we talked specifically about while shooting and also in prep. And of course we had the fire adding, because it's a living light that they're sitting in front, and also that the room is so with the brown walls and everything, that adds to the warmth. But at the same time, not wanting to have too many completely dead spots, like that where it's almost black, just still keeping, so it's like the whole room is warm and cozy.
Yeah, you have that sort of you're keeping that warmth and that sort of more, the homeliness, and keeping in tune with that this is a lived-in area. It's not just a set that's been built up. What I'm curious to know about as well, because in this first 4 sets of episodes, there are different directors and DP and cinematographers. Do you guys ever sort of all sit down and discuss or decide a look to sort of settle on? But then, how do you go about keeping the consistent look, but then also adding your own sort of sprinkle your own sort of touch on it?
Yeah, that's interesting because we did talk. I mean, the other 3 episodes, it's Adriano, and who from the beginning has been with the Crown. He was the one that started up the conceptual DOP way back, and so he's the reason the Crown looks the way it does, and I think he's done a great job. So for this season, we did meet up and talk, like the directors and the DPs, and at the same time, I don't really recall if we didn't make any rules, like strict rules that we have to do it like this or we have to use these kind of lenses and everything. It's I mean, of course we had a set of lenses that was decided since before, because they've changed every other season. So for season 5 and 6, it was mainly Cook S4s. So they're kind of vintage nowadays, these lenses, but not super vintage like the first season, where they had even older Cooks. So we had the Cook S4s. I mean, I just remember talking about different things and talking about the episodes and briefly together, and not making up any specific rules. No, and that's also one thing that I really liked coming into the Crown. Actually, it's of course has its own expression and everything, but the interesting thing is that there are still so many things that has changed throughout the seasons, and every DP and director has made their own language, but it's still so prominent where you are and who you're filming. So it just works, I think. And what I liked is also that you have such freedom. Again, this is my first TV series. And when you do a feature, it's of course that you have to make it from scratch. You have to find out really how you want to do it. And you have all choices in the world, but you have to narrow down to how you're going to do it. And I had no idea how strict it would be, how limited we would be in how we want to do it. And I was just happily surprised that there was actually no limits. And so how we ended up doing it was just the way we wanted to do it. And there were no interference in any way, if we should change it or something. But so I think that's a strength, I would say, from the producers and the production behind The Crown, is that I feel they give, at least my experience, that they give a lot of creative freedom, that they trust their creative partners, which means I'm usually used to operate myself. I mean, I'm from Scandinavia, and that's usually how we do it here. And also when I go away and shoot things, I usually operate myself. And here you have two operators, great all the time. I worked with 4 different operators, and they were all fantastic. And then you have a whole set around them, with the grips and assistants and everything. And the comment there is that you can use them if you want to, or you can shoot yourself. You can do 2 cameras or 1 camera and operate yourself, or not. It's completely up to you. And so they're always giving you the trust in what you believe is the best for the episode, or you and the director. So I think that's a huge thing, actually, that I didn't feel cornered in any way. So it was great in that sense. And then me and Alex talked about different things and how we want to do it, and then again keep the darkness, and then also really focus on getting close to the lead characters, and not doing too much of a longer lenses, which you easily end up doing, especially when you have 2 cameras. So in some situations it was very difficult for us if we wanted to use 2 cameras. And obviously this, with being able to use 2 cameras, and for me not having to operate one of the cameras, but for me to actually be able to look at the shots and then be in dialogue with the operators, is some bonus shots that you can get that you maybe wouldn't have time to do otherwise if it was just a one camera shoot. And that I really, really liked, because the Crown you have time to shoot. It is like a feature. I mean, you don't have to rush it. So then you have time you don't have to cover yourself. Maybe in some situations you do, but many times you can use the two cameras into maybe lifting the scene and getting that little extra. Maybe that's a camera standing around a corner and it's not shooting anything until the end of that setup. But then they're getting a very specific shot that you wouldn't have gotten otherwise. So that's a big bonus.
I guess as well, like just sort of going by what you're first saying about working on a feature compared to a TV series, as I said, with the feature, you have to sort of narrow it down to what would be the most efficient thing when you're working on a feature compared to a TV series, and how you sort of in a feature you're there from A to Z, whilst on a TV series it might be from A to C, and so you need to sort of be more practical about your choices and whatnot. But I think as well, like when you're working on a TV series where they already have a certain look that's been set, it probably takes a bit of time to sort of study what people have done and their lighting techniques, and not necessarily like copying it, but keeping in the same sort of tone in what's been come before, then also adding your own little spin with that. And then when you're saying about lens choices, I think I find when DOPs talk about lenses and choices and positioning of cameras and movement and whatnot really, really interesting, because it's just like you're the final thing of what an audience member will see in terms like visual wise of what you're capturing, and with lenses there's so much that you can really take in or show with the audience. So even if it is like as just an example, like if you have like a zoom lens, you can really pull distance of what somebody here sees, or if you're doing like an extreme close-up, then you can have a 85mm lens on and really capture certain characteristics of a person. And I guess with here on like the Crown, it's there's you do see a lot of reaction shots, but then also it's like the use of a sort of, as he said, like an old school lens. When it's not an old school lens, you could kind of see quite a lot with what's going on.
I mean, the choice of lens for season 5 and 6 is of course not mine, because I came in on season 6. But it's like the Cook S4s. I mean, that we were shooting with. They are lenses that are a bit old now, but they're not being, again, like super old and becoming like an effect. It's just semi-old, which makes them a bit softer, and they're usually a bit warmer, but that you can adjust easily in the grading, so that's not a big thing. But it is just that it has another way of and also breaking the lights and everything. And I do like the Cook lenses in general. So I guess the S4s feel quite normal in a way today, specifically when you're shooting digitally, which is mostly what you do nowadays. Then the choice of lenses become even more important, I would say, because film adds its own texture and how it's breaking the colors and what's happening in the chemical process, that when you're shooting digitally, it's just so sharp and so clear. that is many times that can be quite frustrating because it becomes too realistic. It's like I just recently shot a feature film that we shot on 16mm in Iceland. And then all of a sudden it's another thing that happens. And it's, which was perfect for this production, but it's of course different on every film, even if it's a feature or a TV series.
Yeah, and there's a lot of, I guess it's like there's always going to be different choices of what people want to go for in terms of looks or what they want to show on the screen. But what I'm also curious about, because there is a lot of natural lights in this episode, in terms of you see them on the yachts or Diana going towards the paparazzi, or even like shots from boats where you're like kind of seeing it from the paparazzi's point of view. What I'm curious about is like when it comes to lighting those sets, those scenes, how do you go about it with like the sun being in the sky, and how do you go about not sort of like chasing your tail to overcomplicate it?
I mean, in general, we were following the sun, which means if you take, for example, the scene when Diana actually takes the boat out to the paparazzis, and she comes around the corner of these mountains, and then she comes towards us, and that is shot in the closer to the evening, so the sun is not that high, and most of all she's backlit. So that's of course a choice of what time of the day should we shoot this and where. So then we had this area where we were shooting almost everything that was on the yacht, or it's all quite close to the house that is Mohammed's villa. Also where we were shooting the yacht scenes. But also this when she came, so then she comes around the corner, and then she's being backlit from the sun, and it's later in the day, so the sun is a bit lower, it's a bit warmer, and not as sharp as it is early in the day. So that we could control, and then shooting other directions there, we could just move the boats or just move the boats. It was crazy actually, because there were so many boats, and as you know, boats move when they're also still on the water. So some of them we could anchor, many of them we couldn't. So yeah, that was a struggle of getting the shots we wanted. And I mean, being there, we're shooting quite, so that's the light there, and then just regular bounce. But most of all, I mean, it is the sun that is dictating when we're shooting and what directions we shoot, because that's our big light that we can't move, so we have to move. And there as well, when we were on the boats, we were also just many of these paparazzi scenes. There we have a lot of long lenses, and that is of course also just to get more into this stressful feeling of the paparazzi. And it doesn't have to be the paparazzi's lens, but it is a little bit. So we're almost becoming the paparazzi, the way we're shooting it. Also, when she comes up there, it's quite long lenses, and being also far away, maybe sensing some of the paparazzi in the foreground and everything. So kind of becoming more hectic and intense by using the long lenses there, and also in other paparazzi situations. But it's also like, for example, when we're on the yacht, it's a lot of the natural lighting because it's a lot of it is outside. And luckily we could move the boat. So the boat was always moving, so we got the light where we wanted it to be. It takes a while to adjust this big of a boat to turn around and do all these things, and then it of course floats again. So so that's how we did it. So we could get the sun where we wanted, and it was mostly sun when we were down in Mallorca shooting those scenes. They were supposed to be South France.
The magic. Go on.
Yeah, no, I was just thinking, because it's also interesting this when you go finding out things and going to locations and finding out that maybe it's better to actually shoot here or there, or have, instead of the way it was written in the script and so on. So there were a lot of things there where Alex, the director, changed and or checked with the scriptwriter if it was okay to change and everything. And so many of them did change. And for example, we knew that on the boat they were being so much outside, and the interior of the boat has some like crazy interior on the boat. So for example, that changed. So the piano scene when they have their long talk then got changed into being inside and being more intimate and more private and calmer and not being outside in the scorching sun all the time. So and then there was this grand piano, and then Alex then thought of all these things that maybe she should then be playing the piano. Did Diana play the piano and so on? And then the research said she did, and so on. So it ended up being that. And then the scene to find out, okay, so like you were mentioning that scene earlier when Dodi comes back from being on this tiny boat with Kelly, and then him standing by the bar, and then something moves in the background. You can't really tell, but that's her sitting by the piano. So what was great with that scene was then to start bigger and then go smaller, and then throughout the scene, which is very intimate, and how they have very different fathers, but they understand each other, how both of them always wanted to please their fathers. And then they get closer and closer, and then it becomes close up towards the end, where they're all of a sudden, without having the kids around and all the action, it's just the two of them inside. And they have this grand piano between them, where Diana is kind of hiding behind the piano at the beginning, and then they just get closer and closer, and I think that works very well in the sense of without being a dramatic scene, a lot of movements, but there's still a little bit of movement and focus on the story and the actors and the acting and their connection, and then then it's the ending that Alex has pointed out that he really liked, that she has to go past him, and it's very narrow. Yeah, that Diana has to go past Dodi, very, very close, and that's kind of when maybe the first spark is started. And again, that's also what locations do, that when they can inspire to other things, and the piano was bolted into the boat, so you couldn't move it anything. You just had to find your ways around it.
I think as well that's the magic of filmmaking, that you can shoot in one country to make it look like another country, and unless if you're going frame by frame, you could probably point something out that's wrong. But
definitely,
we don't watch films like that, so we'll be noticing that. But so that's the first point. The second point as well, I think, with the idea of like being on water as well, and you having that sort of a finite amount of time because you are chasing the sun, and having your what's called, you must be so prepped and planned for that scene, because it's going to be like look, we only have a certain amount of time. We need to go in, shoot, go out, and that's it, and then continue. Try get as much as we can over the how many days we have this planned.
Yes, I mean this scene when they had their talk around the grand piano, for example. I mean that is a quite long dialogue. I would guess it's probably the most massive dialogue scene for episode 1. And then I think that's the thing as well. You also have to, of course, choose what is the focus with the scene, and what is the meaning of the scene, and here it is more to find a good base, a good ground for the actors to do that scene, and to have time to perform and be present in the acting. So then you don't want to complicate the cinematographer too much either, because that's just going to be annoying. So it's quite, so you have time to what is important for that specific scene. And then there can be another scene where it's just one shot that takes forever, because then maybe that's for that scene that is important. So it's always to find out where to push things and when not to, and to get the best out of what you want to tell.
I think it's done really well in the scene, and in terms of going from sort of more wilder moments of like the paparazzi or the kids running around having fun to going to those more quiet and intimate moments, and then it kind of leads to that final scene of where Diana walks into the room full of roses and the opening of the Cartier watch. Sort of, as you said, you have that spark, and then you see it sort of ignite in a way with that scene with the roses, which kind of leads me to the question as well. Like, when you're shooting a scene with roses like that, are the flowers fake or real? Because if they're real, it must be quite difficult for everybody to keep the continuity of them looking sort of like healthy and alive before the lights sort of drain them too much. Of the lights drain like the water and sort of like cook them a little bit.
I mean, the thing is with the crown, it's real, definitely. I mean, just in general, there are some incredible flower decorations throughout the seasons. I mean, just looking when you're at the castle and everything, they're fantastic and they're real. And the same here. So luckily today, I mean, lighting wise, the lights are not so warm nowadays because you don't have as many tungsten lights in general. So yeah, they're just hanging in there. And I mean, this was of course part of a day shoot to shoot these flowers. So you just have them keeping track on which ones are the happiest ones. Let's have them in front, and then the sadder ones will hide in the background where we don't sense them as much.
I get, again, magic of filmmaking,
Yes.
hiding, yes. Rearranging them and making them look slightly different.
Definitely.
Just to sort of come to my final question, what was your favourite scene to shoot?
Oh, I should have thought of that.
I think this is the one question that catches everybody off guard, because it's always yes. Because you're always going to be proud of all of it, right? But at the same time, yeah. it's like, well, which one do I choose? It's like picking your favorite child, basically.
Yeah, and it's also because we were shooting episode 8, so I have them both in my head, and I think in episode 8 I kind of know. Trying to, have you thought of anything that you?
What my favorite scenes?
Like more visually, or yeah.
I think so. I think the party scene of where they're dancing is one that's quite great visually, just because of the lighting, in terms of how with the bulbs above them and lighting this sort of greenhouse marquee effectively, and it looks it has that really nice warmth to it and that feel of it's just a really nice time for a party, and you can tell that people are there, even though there's like an underlining unacceptance of Camilla, but it's sort of it's in, as the kids say, it's good vibes.
Yes.
But and I think that's one of them. Another one is the framing of when Charles is with his advisors and they're talking about the newspapers and talking about the different ways of, like, air quotes, the war that they're doing amongst one another, and how various newspapers are printing various things. I really like the framing of how Charles is in the middle and he's kind of and the two advisors are on either side of the frame. I've always liked that sort of framing, and I feel like that's a very powerful might not be the right word, but it's more that there's like you're, as an audience as well, you kind of feel like you're summoned in front of the actor whilst he's addressing you as well. So you're like, well, you kind of feel more vicariously involved. And I think the third one is when Dodie and his fiance are arguing, and
on the boat,
because on the boat,
the yacht,
because there's no camera movement, there's nothing there. That could be a scene that could be easily done where it'll be quick cuts of like over the shoulder there, wide there. Whilst here the camera's just stationary, so you're just watching it unfold like you're not supposed to be there. And then also with the sound taken out as well, really enhances that experience as well.
I agree. I really there are definitely a couple of things, but what I also do like with what you're saying, that scene is also the contrast of how you're telling the story of Kelly and that situation through location and the visual storytelling as well. I mean, through the script and the visual script, you could say, because of the contrast that she's Kelly, the fiancée of Dodie, that she's coming to visit him, but she's not allowed to be on the same boat. So she has a much smaller boat. It's a yacht. It's not tiny, but it's much smaller than this mansion of a yacht that Mohammed has, where Dodie and Diana and the boys are staying. So the great thing here, because when we were shooting this scene, we hadn't had a chance to be on the boat before we were going to shoot it. So we had only, Alex, the director, and I only have thoughts of how we thought we might do it. And then stepping on the boat, that was just so difficult with making it organically work and feeling right. So we tried some things and we tried in another, and then we just had to say, this doesn't work. I mean, we started to how we would shoot it and did some tests. And this was on the day of shooting. So it was kind of like quite stressful because it's such an important scene. And we had talked as well a lot about the Kelly character. So she just doesn't only become this money grabbing character, but she's not. She's actually in love with Dodie and she feels him slipping away. So she's desperate because it was just important that you understood her as a character as well, which you do, I think, in the scene when she's calling Dodie before she goes there, and when she's calling him and asking what's going on, what's happening. She's calling from her apartment, and he's more or less lying, and she's kind of facing him about his lie. And I think those small things, what's happening there when we're really close to her there with a wider lens, so you're in her face, you're not just standing at a distance, you're with her. I think that little thing with her beautiful acting makes us understand that this is very real and she's very much in love. And of course she doesn't want to lose him. They're supposed to get married in a few weeks. So having that, and hopefully that the audience have had that connection with her as a person, then getting to this boat when we see Dodie, who has then been in the huge yacht, going to this smaller yacht, and then we're actually underground. There are no windows, or we don't see any windows. There is this tiny, tiny corridor, and at the end is the room where Kelly is waiting for Dodie. And I totally agree with this, just staying there, staying on the distance, and then seeing how they're struggling with their relationship, how she's desperately trying to reach into him and to make him understand, and just staying there with the camera, not tracking, not doing anything, just being there and letting it play out. I do like that scene, and I also do like how they chose to edit it, and also with the sound and everything. I completely agree, because I mean the next cut, if I remember correctly, that's after that argument that ends up in them kissing, and then him leaving the boat behind, and then his having the drink, and him and Diana are having their long talk. I think that works very well. And also that's the contrast again of him having to hide Kelly, or Kelly having to accept being hidden. And then you understand maybe her desperation more and more. And then ending up in this fancy room with a grand piano at Mohammed's ship. No, I agree. I do like that. And it's interesting this with finding out how to shoot a scene. It can be, some scenes needs so many shots, and then some scenes is just a single shot, and then the whole story is there.
I can imagine, like, as when you're discussing with the director and planning out how you're going to shoot out scenes, like sometimes you could meticulously plan it to the with storyboards and how you want to have everything look. Then sometimes stepping on location or a set build, it can all change like that, and you think, oh, how can we do this? Or even timing of how long you might have with actors. And I particularly like that Dodie one where you see that contrast of like you're being on a air quotes smaller boat, even though it's still a yacht, it's still probably in real life worth more than I'll ever have in my life. But it's still that sort of contrast of not being on the main boat and not having that, being like hidden away from the world, effectively, sort of scenario.
And that's again as well, this then we sense that it's probably underwater where Kelly is residing. But at the same time, with the long corridor, I think that makes it even more claustrophobic and more dense in how they are pressured in their relationship throughout this whole setup from Mohammed Fayed with Dodi and Diana.
Yeah, and I think you kind of you're not, as a fly on the wall, you're not supposed to see it, but you're there anyway, taking it all in. And I as I said, that's probably one of my favorite ones. Go on, sorry.
No, but it's so interesting, and I think that, I mean, that's a part of filmmaking, is this to always be open when you're filming. You always have to be, because you can plan into details, or maybe you've decided not to plan into details. That's also many times that's actually up to the director, how they feel the best when they're working. If it's like planned into this detail that some like, and some maybe wants to have more freedom from the beginning because they feel locked in if it's been planned too much. But no matter what, you always have to be open for changes, because it is always this, that maybe what you have planned doesn't work. And you have to be so focused on the film or the story that you have to not be afraid of saying, I don't think this is working, we need to change. And maybe that's going to feel annoying or for people, because maybe they don't understand why, because they thought the setup was good. But if it doesn't feel right, and if you have the time to change, then you kind of have to do that. And the scene again that you're mentioning is exactly that we just had to change, and then we ended up in the corridor and shooting that shot instead, which I don't remember exactly, but I definitely think there are other places in these two episodes where we did that as well, where we just had to change. And especially as a director, you really have to listen to your own gut feeling, because many times it's right. But then at the same time, you also have, like for example, that shoot, we almost went over time, but we didn't. The one on the boat, and that is also one thing with The Crown, that they're very, very, very seldom you go over time. You really should never go over time, and they're very strict about that. And I think that's a good thing for the whole crew that is working with this. like episode after episode after episode, because they should be able to keep their energy throughout 10 episodes. I'm just there for 2, and Alex is just there for 2. So, but for them to be able to keep on working, you should really not go overtime in general. Of course, it happens. But now I jump to something else, but yeah. Okay, what I meant about that is that you should, of course, again, listen to your gut and really try and make it work, and see if there are things that you really have to change, maybe a whole setup that is like, it's not working, we have to do it like this instead. But if you're taking that choice together with the director, or if the directors take that choice and then you support him or her, then you really need to find a solution so you can make it work within the time frame as well. So it's like give and take.
Yeah, it's a very fine balancing act as well, because you want to get what's correct, but then also you be considerate about the time restraints. And yeah, I can imagine that sometimes there's a lot sort of going on, and especially if there's something that you need to change and have that that quick sort of like, actually you need to just go with a quick decision and go from there and see what happens, and then hope for the best that you can create what you can create. And as you said, go with that gut feeling. And I think somebody had told me as well, like 90% of the time your gut feeling is always correct. Just need to sort of stick with it and go with it.
It is. And then yes, and I think and then the gut feeling is different for different people, but you are only yourself, and you kind of follow your own gut feeling, that is maybe the style, which you of course change from different films, but at the same time you have some kind of built-in style as well of what you prefer, and that's the only gut feeling you can follow. And someone else will think of something else. Yes, but then that is matching that person's preferences or style. Yeah. Another director and the DP would have found another solution, which would have been good for them. So it's always this to find out what feels good for you. Sometimes, of course, you have to okay, no, I can't. We don't have time to change this thing. And then you have to go with it. And then you have to decide when to do your battles or
pick your battles.
Pick your battles. Because it's not just that shot. It's everything around it, of course, which is the whole thing of making film. The whole, you're solving problems all the time. There are always things coming up on set. And then it's, of course, all the collaboration that you have with so many brilliant people to make things work and hopefully listen to each other.
Yeah, exactly. And on that note, I think it's a very nice way to bookend talking about your work on the first part of the latest series of The Crown, which is streaming now on Netflix. And hopefully we can get you back for part 2 to talk about episode 8, if I'm correct.
Yes, that's correct.
There's a celebrate off screen. Thank you so much for your time today, Sophia.
Thank you so much.
Very much appreciated. As I said, The Crown's streaming now on Netflix, and hopefully we'll have you back for part 2. You take care, and bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening. Please subscribe, rate, and review this podcast.